As you enter the forest, you would notice the sound of a creature. When you hear this sound, you can feel it in your bones that the scaled terror is within. You are assigned to find out how these creatures reproduce and how to kill them. No one has ever successfully been able to. These things regenerate like crazy. The only idea so far is to pierce it and let it bleed out, because if one slices off part of it, it will grow into a new one in days' time. Maybe that's how they reproduce. Maybe they slice parts of them bodies off, and then suddenly a new one forms. But that's just speculation. You need to find out the truth. Recently, 2 of them have been seen around the town, and that's despairing. These creatures are highly territorial. If anything enters their territory, they strike at it. Their speed, quicker than anything, like a flash of coloration. All it takes is a second, and they will be on you. You are an aspiring hunter trying your best to be able to take one down. But will you manage to do so? Do you have a group of friends with you? Or are you doing a solo? Do you have a town army ready to help you out? Or do they just want you to get this done with so that they can go on with their lives? The scaled terror cares not for what you do. It cares not of what your plans may be. The venom that rushes through its teeth is all it ever needs to deal with any trespassers. So, the question becomes, what do you do next? Will you try to sneak into its lair? Use your survival skills to track its location down? How are you going to figure out how these creatures reproduce? After all, it all takes 1 second for your breath to be its last. Homebrew Monsters. I love homebrew. I love it so much that I actually want to make a video on it. You see, creatures that are created by one's own mind can never really be beaten by creatures that are already created for you. That's how I feel about a lot of things. It does, you do need the other creatures to flesh out your world sometimes. Sometimes you need to have just a basic creature that is already made so that you can easily be able to set up encounters for your people, because making them mechanically can be very difficult. That's actually why I loved Hecarim. It was my own setting. It was something that every single thing in it I could technically create because there was no mechanics involved. I could just describe a creature to them and they can deal with it. But the scaled terror exists in both worlds, technically. It doesn't exist inside Hecarim anymore ever since the extinction of all animals, but in Hecarim, it might have a resurgence in the future. Who knows? Those things are very difficult to kill, very difficult to keep down for very long. In D&D, I actually did make a creature like this. In fact, my fiance is actually drawing it, and if she finishes by the time this video goes up, at the end I might be able to show it. Either way, the scaled terror is a creature that was created with a thought experiment, a thing I like to do with different people. If I go towards you and we are meeting for the first time, or if we met each other a few times, but I don't know what to say to you, I might just say to you, hey, do you want to create something with me? And then you will either run away and say, that guy's a weirdo, or you will sit down and we can have a talk. You see, all you really need to do is have them answer a few questions that you create that will allow them to basically create a creature. You can ask yourself these questions too if you are trying to make yourself inspirational here. Basically, the first question you can ask is, where is this creature from? Is it from a forest? Is it from a desert? Is it from an oasis? Where is it from? Because when you are able to decide where the location of it is, you can start thinking of what it will be doing there. What type of aesthetic may it have, and such. But first, where is it from? After you have where it's from, you can say, where in this location does it rest? What does it look for? Is it something that wants to be near a waterfall, lake, and stuff like that? Or is it something that wants to be buried within the sands? Then you can ask yourself, after you get that, what does it hunt or is it hunted? Is it a creature that eats plants or is it one that eats animals? And if it eats animals, then is it small animals or big animals? And how does it do so? We get into those questions, and whenever they can't answer it, you can move on to other ones, and then you can circle back to it. Those are just questions you can start asking at that point. Because if it's in a terrain, you know what other things could live in that terrain. So then you could start to say, yeah, no, it hunts rabbits, or it hunts small creatures in general, depending on how your world works or how you're asking yourself or someone else. You can also, if you have like ideas of your own and you're asking someone else, point out, oh yeah, no, it could be this, it could be that as well. It may be considered leading at times, but sometimes it can be helpful for the person if they are truly stumped and they're trying this with good, faith. Some people will just answer these questions because, they're shy and you suddenly approach them asking them, hey, you want to make something? But that's not the point. So, another question you can ask them is if it's bipedal or if it's quadrupedal or if it has multiple legs, basically wondering how it moves around. Because how it moves around can help determine what exactly it will look like while it's moving. And it can also help you make ideas of maybe some things it can do. If it has 4 arms, 2 legs, and walks on its hind legs, maybe it's more like a person than we think. Maybe it's more like a gorilla with 4 arms, stuff like that. Oh, that's a good idea. A gorilla with 4 arms. Anyways, so what you can also do is after you get an idea of what the creature base looks like, you can also ask what colors does it wear? Because in nature, bright colors can often mean venomous, and dull colors can mean a variety of different things. And sometimes bright colors are just used as a way to attract the mate. And all these are things that you can start thinking of when you are discussing the colors of your creatures that you are now making. We can also look at how the creature reacts to people. Is it territorial, or is it something that allows other creatures to live around it? Is it venomous? Does that poison? Is it none of that? And then you can ask them, were you thinking of anything when you picture it? Any scales or anything like that? And with that, you can have a creature created. Like, for example, the creature I just made was a 4-armed gorilla that manages to punch anything with the 2 arms while it can move around with the other ones. Basically, a mobile gorilla creature that is all about the punches. It is something that likes other people, so if you are nice to it, like offer it food and such, it probably wouldn't attack you, but it also is not the smartest of creatures, so if you are offering it food and it loves you enough, if it thinks you're like its pet or child or something like that, it will grab you, and then you're being grabbed by a 4-armed gorilla, and that's not a fun time. But overall, it would be something that would be kind of nice. It lives inside the forest as well. Not the same forest as a Skelterra. No. Of course, they understand that creature will eat them. But they live. Now, this 4-armed gorilla is something that is an omnivore. It can eat small animals, but it chooses to eat plants usually. And it doesn't have any venom or anything like that, but it's very strong. It can punch a daylight out. Now, the other thing comes into this. Now that you have a creature, we need to make mechanics, don't we? Well, if you're making a world like Hecarim, which is an RP-based one, you don't. You can just say, well, we know it's a very strong gorilla. It's about as strong as a gorilla. But if you were making it in D&D, then yeah, you need stats. You need stats to be able to determine how strong the creature would be. And for the Skelterra, and now this gorilla, I'm making them in my head right now. Skelterra, I already made, but gorilla, yeah, that's going in the world. So let's talk about that. The stats that you need to think about have to make sense within your world, has to make sense with a CR of some kind, and you need to be able to make it so it works in general. If a 4-armed gorilla can never exist in your world for whatever reason, then it's something you probably shouldn't put in there. You can keep it and put it in the backlogs for when you need it, but you have to keep in mind what makes sense in your world. 4-armed gorilla would make sense in my demon-infested world where there are various demons that can destroy you. It could be a demon gorilla. I bet you that someone already made a 4-armed gorilla. Hell, it could be a D&D creature that I just don't know about right now. If it is one, write one in the comics. Because if you have it in the comment section, I'll heart it, I'll pin it, and I'm going to allow you to say, hey man, this already exists. Which sadly happens a lot. So, if we have the idea of what that could be, we can do stats in a few ways. You can make stats that are based off of it because of what you think, which can lead to issues. Or you can look at other creatures that may have similar stats to it and use that as inspiration. So if you are making a 4-armed gorilla that is about as strong as a gorilla, you can look up stats for a gorilla. I'm sure that exists. If it doesn't exist, then you can look at something that you would assume is as strong as a gorilla and then add that as the stats and such. I mean, I know there's an elephant in the game, so if there's no gorilla, I wouldn't be upset about that. Then you can also look at things that might be different because of it. So if it's a 4-armed gorilla, does that mean that it has more strength? Does it mean it has more dexterity? Does it mean that it has better movement? Stuff like that. And you can make those alterations. Now, let's say that you created something that is unique in its own way. Let's say that you made a creature like the Scaled Terror, something that doesn't necessarily have another creature that you can scale off of. I guess you can make it scale off of dinosaurs, but it is a quick-moving reptile creature that lives in the forest that manages to have poison and strong jaws. It is more like an SCP than it is a D&D character, but in some ways, it's the same idea. So, what do? Well, you could playtest. You create the creature based on what you think, yeah, and then you make a small party of 4 people because CR is based on 4 people, and you can playtest with it. See if it's strong enough, see if you like what it does, watch as the different attacks come through and see if that makes sense in your world. Do you want the Scaled Terror to have a +6 to its attack and damage because of its stats, or do you want it to have something more or less? You have to make the ideas, judgment calls, and you have to be able to make the decision on your own if it is going to be in your world. So, yeah, you could end up scrapping an idea that maybe was really good or really bad, but it is something that's just part of the process. You kind of have to deal with that to be able to create stuff that is uniquely your own while also making it so that it can work within your world. You should do playtesting regardless whenever you do homebrew, because you never know how people are going to use it or abuse it, especially with items. Hell, even with D&D official stuff, people will use things in ways you don't know. Like, for example, one player of mine who may or may not have already commented on one of these videos, who may just jump off the side of a floating island and use mold earth to go into the actual island, using featherfall to make sure that his fall would be monitored, and a rope to tie him down to make sure that he won't fall off the island. Then he just goes to the side of the island and molds earth into the secret base that was in the island that you were planning for them to get to at the very end of the campaign. And now he's at the end of the campaign at level 1, and it's probably not a good idea for him to be there. But yeah, people will use things in ways you never thought. So when you make anything homebrew, creature or otherwise, keep that in mind. You never know what they're going to do. And I hope this helped. If you create a creature using these tips, please write it in the comments. Subscribe to me if you feel like it. And ring that bell if you want to see these videos. I upload basically every Wednesday, and on my gaming channel, I upload whenever we have a new game that we're doing. It's whenever it's released that same day for that week. I think currently I'm doing Death's Door and Have a Nice Death. Both of them strangely related. All right, have a good one.